I got here during the summer and I had 18 letters of resignation on my desk from teachers out of 45. That was really scary. And then the discipline on the first day was shocking. I'd never seen kids that disengaged before. After really fighting hard to stabilize Bates Middle School for the first 3 years, it became obvious that we needed a whole school reform effort.
Because we're an arts integration school, every teacher is expected to use arts integration in their classrooms in some shape or form, in every content area. The idea behind arts integration is that you learn the content area through the art, so it sort of opens a new door to understanding.
One of the things that the arts do is they provide different strategies and different skills that go across all curriculum. Collaboration, problem-solving skills. You have to figure out what will work, and you have to work through it. And sometimes you fail, and you gain from failure. I mean, that's the best thing about the arts. You don't have to be perfect all the time. We need to teach kids that you learn through failure. Take that risk. You take a risk, you're successful, that's a lifelong skill for kids.
We ask ourselves, where are the kids struggling? And we want to then target that standard because we want to approach it through arts integration to find another way to reach them.
Maddie, read the learning goal for us, nice and loud.
I will understand and demonstrate rotation and revolution by choreographing a dance.
Thank you very much. Today, you kids are dancing.
I wanted my kids to understand rotation and revolution. They frequently mix them up.
You will choose a movement from your choreography today, and you will tell me how your movement represents rotation or revolution.
So I decided to make 2 dance groups.
If I was doing the learning out of a textbook, it wouldn't stick with me, because I'm a visual learner, I'm an active learner. So by doing exciting things, creative things, it sparks my interest. So then my mind, it keeps it in my mind like, oh, remember when you did this, remember when you did that. When we have our unit test, then I can know the characteristics of the different planets.
These are all the movements I want to see included in your choreography. I'm going to give you 2, okay?
Okay. Alec is the sun, and you get in the middle, and we all get in a circle at the very beginning.
Everyone who's an expert of each planet, we each go around it however fast the planet goes.
Boom! 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 Winter.
We've seen a huge difference in the kinds of questions that the kids are answering and the kinds of questions teachers are asking, because when they use the art to ask these critical thinking questions, the kids are using skills that they didn't know they had.
Over the last 5 years, we've made significant gains in all of our student groups. For instance, our English language learners have increased their student achievement in math and in reading by almost 30%. Our special ed scores are jumping higher than we could have even hoped. And we're developing a body of research data that show that arts integration can help struggling students learn those standards.
To see parents that never came into a school to all of a sudden be there, to come in and say, thank you, my son is engaged where he never was before. I saw what it did for kids, and it's changed my career. I mean, they say arts are transformative. It transformed me.
So, if you add rules to play, you have a game. That's actually what an experiment is. So armed with these 2 ideas, that science is a way of being, and experiments are play, we asked, can anyone become a scientist? And who better to ask than 25 8 to 10-year-old children, because they're experts in play. So I took my B Arena down to a small school in Devon, and the aim of this was to not just get the kids to see science differently, but through the process of science to see themselves differently. Right? The first step was to ask a question. Now, I should say that we didn't get funding for this study because the scientists said small children could make a useful contribution to science, and the teacher said kids couldn't do it. So we did it anyway, right? Of course. So here are some of the questions. I put them in small print so you wouldn't bother reading it. Point is that 5 of the questions that the kids came up with were actually the basis of science publication in the last 5 to 15 years. right? So they were asking questions that were significant to expert scientists. Now here, I want to share the stage with someone quite special, right? She was one of the young people who was involved in this study, and she's now one of the youngest published scientists in the world, right? She will now, once she comes onto stage, will be the youngest person to ever speak at TED, right? Now science and asking questions about courage. Now she is the personification of courage because she's going to stand up here and talk to you all. So Amy, would you please come up? So Amy's going to help me tell the story of what we call the Black Alton Bees project. And first she's going to tell you the question that they came up with. So go ahead, Amy.
Thank you, Bo. We thought that it was easy to see the link between humans and apes in the way that we think, because we look alike. But we wondered if there's a possible link with other animals. It'd be amazing if humans and bees thought similar, since they seem so different from us. So we asked if humans and bees might solve complex problems in the same way. Really, we want to know if bees can also adapt themselves to new situations using previously learnt rules and conditions. So, what if bees can think like us? Well, it'd be amazing since we're talking about an insect with only 1 million brain cells. But actually it makes a lot of sense they should, because bees, like us, can recognise a good fowl regardless of the time of day, the light, the weather, or from any angle it approached it from.
So the next step was to design an experiment, which is a game. So the kids went off and they designed this experiment, and so, game. And so Amy, can you tell us what the game was and the puzzle that you set the bees?
The puzzle we came up with was an if-then rule. We asked the bees to learn not just to go to a certain colour, but to a certain coloured flower, only when it's in a certain pattern. They were only rewarded if they went to the yellow flowers, if the yellow flowers were surrounded by the blue, or if the blue flowers were surrounded by the yellow. Now, there's a number of different rules the bees can learn to solve this puzzle. The interesting question is, which? What was really exciting about this project was we and Bo had no idea whether it was work. It was completely new and no one had done it before, including adults.
Including the teachers. And that was really hard for the teachers. It's easy for a scientist to go in and not have a clue what he's doing, because that's what we do in the lab. But for a teacher not to know what's going to happen at the end of the day. So much of the credit goes to Dave Strudwick, who is the collaborator on this project. Okay? So I'm not going to go through the whole details of the study, because actually you can read about it. But the next step is observation. So here are some of the students doing the observations. They're recording the data of where the bees fly.
She's finishing off that.
So what we're going to do... Is she still going up here?
Yeah.
So you keep track, please.
Wait, can you help me?
Can you help me, Henry? What good scientist says that, right?
And 2 up there. And 2.
Right, so we've got our observations, we've got our data. They do the simple mathematics, averaging, etc., etc. And now we want to share. That's the next step. So we're going to write this up and try to submit this for publication. So the kids give me the words, right? I put it into a narrative, which means that this paper is written in kids' speak. It's not written by me, it's written by Amy and the other students in the class. As a consequence, this science paper begins once upon a time. The results section, it says, turning phase, the puzzle, dun, 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 right? And the methods, it says, then we put the bees into the fridge and made bee pie, smiley face, right? This is a science paper. We're going to try to get it published. So here's the title page. We have a number of authors there. All the ones in bold are 8 to 10 years old. The first author is Black Alton Primary School, because if it were ever referenced, it would be Black Alton et al., and not one individual. So we submit it to a public access journal, and it says this. It said many things, but it said this. I'm afraid the paper fails our initial quality control checks in several different ways. In other words, it starts off once upon a time, the figures in crayon, etc. So we decide, we'll get it reviewed. So I send it to Dale Purvis, who is the National Academy of Science, one of the leading neuroscientists in the world, and he says this is the most original scientific paper I've ever read, and it certainly deserves wide exposure. Larry Maloney, expert in vision, says the paper is magnificent. The work would be publishable if done by adults. So this makes Amy and her friends the youngest published scientists in the world. What was the feedback like? Well, it was published 2 days before Christmas, downloaded 30,000 times in the first day, right? It was editor's choice in Science, which is the top science magazine. It's forever freely accessible by biology letters. It's the only paper that will ever be freely accessible by this journal. Last year, it was the second most downloaded paper by biology letters, and the feedback from not just scientists and teachers, but the public as well. And I'll just read one. I have read Black Mountain Bees recently. I don't have words to explain exactly how I'm feeling right now. What you guys have done is real, true, and amazing. Curiosity, interest, innocence, and zeal are the most basic, most important things to do science. Who else can have these qualities more than children? Please congratulate your children's team from my side.
I started in 1999 to try and address this problem with an experiment, which was a very simple experiment in New Delhi. I basically embedded a computer into a wall of a slum in New Delhi. The children barely went to school. They didn't know any English. They'd never seen a computer before, and they didn't know what the internet was. I connected high-speed internet to it. It's about 3 feet off the ground. Turned it on and left it there. After this, we noticed a couple of interesting things which you'll see. But I repeated this all over India and then through a large part of the world, and noticed that children will learn to do what they want to learn to do. This is the first experiment that we did. 8-year-old boy on your right, teaching his student, a 6-year-old girl, and he was teaching her how to browse. This boy here in the middle of central India, this is in a Rajasthan village where the children recorded their own music and then played it back to each other. And in the process, they enjoyed themselves thoroughly. They did all of this in 4 hours after seeing the computer for the first time. In another South Indian village, these boys here had assembled a video camera and were trying to take the photograph of a bumblebee. They had downloaded it from Disney.com or one of these websites 14 days after putting the computer in their village. So at the end of it, we concluded that groups of children can learn to use computers and the internet on their own, irrespective of who or where they were. At that point, I became a little more ambitious and decided to see what else could children do with a computer. We started off with an experiment in Hyderabad, India, where I gave a group of children, they spoke English with a very strong Telugu accent. I gave them a computer with a speech-to-text interface, which you now get free with Windows, and asked them to speak into it. So when they spoke into it, the computer typed out gibberish. So they said, oh, it doesn't understand anything of what we are saying. So I said, yeah, I'll leave it here for 2 months. Make yourself understood to the computer. So the children said, how do we do that? And I said, well, I don't know, actually. And and I left. 2 months later, and this is now documented in the Information Technology for International Development Journal, their accents had changed and were remarkably close to the neutral British accent in which I had trained the speech-to-text synthesizer. And all over India, at the end of about 2 years, children were beginning to Google their homework. As a result, the teachers reported tremendous improvements in their English. Rapid improvement in all sorts of things. They said they've become really deep thinkers and so on and so forth. And indeed, they had. I mean, if there's stuff on Google, why would you need to stuff it into your head? I wanted to test the limits of this system. The first experiment I did out of Newcastle was actually done in India, and I set myself an impossible target. Can Tamil-speaking 12-year-old children in a South Indian village teach themselves biotechnology in English on their own? And I thought, I'll test them, they'll get a 0, I'll give them material, I'll come back and test them, they'll get another 0, I'll go back and say, yes, we need teachers for certain things. I called in 26 children, they all came in there, and I told them, look, there's some really difficult stuff on this computer. I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't understand anything. It's all in English, and I'm going. So I left them with it. I came back after 2 months, and the 26 children marched in looking very, very quiet. I said, well, did you look at any of the stuff? They said, yes, we did. Did you understand anything? No, nothing. So I said, well, how long did you practice on it before you decided that you understood nothing? They said, we look at it every day. So I said, for 2 months you were looking at stuff you didn't understand. So a 12-year-old girl raises her hand and says, literally, apart from the fact that improper replication of the DNA molecule causes genetic disease, we've understood nothing else. Took me 3 years to publish that. It's just been published in the British Journal of Educational Technology. One of the referees who refereed the paper said, it's too good to be true, which was not very nice. So their scores had gone up from 0 to 30%, which is an educational impossibility under the circumstances. But 30% is not a pass. So I found that they had a friend, a local accountant, a young girl, and they played football with her. I asked that girl, would you teach them enough biotechnology to pass? And she said, how would I do that? I don't know the subject. I said, no, use the method of the grandmother. She said, what's that? I said, well, what you've got to do is stand behind them and admire them all the time. Just say to them, that's cool, that's fantastic, what is that? Can you do that again? Can you show me some more? She did that for 2 months. The scores went up to 50, which is what the posh schools of New Delhi with a trained biotechnology teacher were getting. In Gateshead, I took 32 children, and I started to fine-tune a method. I made them into groups of 4. I said, you make your own groups of 4. Each group of 4 can use 1 computer and not 4 computers. Remember, from the hole in the wall. You can exchange groups. You can walk across to another group if you don't like your group, etc. You can go to another group, peer over their shoulders, see what they're doing, come back to your own group, and claim it as your own work. And I explained to them that a lot of scientific research is done using that method. The children enthusiastically got after me to say, now what do you want us to do? I gave them 6 GCSE questions. The first group, the best one, solved everything in 20 minutes. The worst, in 45. They used everything that they knew. News groups, Google, Wikipedia, Ask Jeeves, etc. The teachers said, is this deep learning? I said, well, let's try it. I'll come back after 2 months. We'll give them a paper test, no computers, no talking to each other, etc. The average score when I had done it with the computers and the groups was 76%. When I did the experiment, when I did the test after 2 months, the score was 76%. There was photographic recall inside the children, I suspect because they're discussing with each other. A single child in front of a single computer will not do that. I have further results which are almost unbelievable of scores which go up with time. Because their teachers say that after the session is over, the children continue to Google further. Here in Britain, I put out a call for British grandmothers after my Kuppam experiment. Well, they're very vigorous people, British grandmothers. 200 of them volunteered immediately. The deal was that they would give me 1 hour of broadband time sitting at their homes 1 day in a week. So they did that, and over the last 2 years, over 600 hours of instruction has happened over Skype using what my students call the granny cloud. Granny cloud sits over there. I can beam them to whichever school I want to.
You can't catch me. You say it. You can't catch me. I'm the gingerbread man. Well done. Very good, Sophie.
We are part of the Millennium Generation.
When I was born, the World Wide Web was already 8 years old. I have grown up with computers, video games, and cell phones.
Consequently, I learned differently than you did.
Chalkboards aren't in my classrooms, smartboards are.
I don't write my papers, I present them. I don't journal, I blog.
I learn better in groups, not alone.
I may act like I don't want to learn, but I do.
I just don't want to be bored. I want to explore, create, invent,
and share.
You are preparing me for jobs that don't yet exist. How will you help me succeed? Don't prepare us for your world.
Prepare us for ours.